Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today we return with another question and answer session. What single practice of Bhakti Yoga will jumpstart my spiritual life today? Regardless even of what religion you identify with. In fact, this question was inspired by a member of our community. Her religious affiliation is Christian, and she wanted to know how to practice Bhakti Yoga while being Christian. To simplify this, we're going to cover what single practice of Bhakti Yoga will strengthen your relationship with the Supreme, with God, regardless of your religious affiliation. And it's a really easy practice to implement in your life. Now, while today's session answers our community members' question, it's also widely applicable to many of our listeners for those who feel they just don't have much time for spiritual practices due to work or family or church activities, whatever it is. And in that case, without a doubt, the one practice of Bhakti Yoga to add to your daily life is chanting the Maha Mantra. It doesn't take much time to do. And it's up to you how much you chant. It may even be for 10 minutes a day. But it's an incredibly powerful way to directly connect to Krishna, who is the Supreme or God. Remember at this point that bhakti is a word meaning devotional service, and yoga is a word meaning to link or to connect. So bhakti yoga means the yoga of connecting to the Supreme, us plus Krishna on the slide, through loving devotional service or bhakti. Bhakti Yoga actually includes 9 processes of devotional service for reconnecting to the Supreme, for connecting to God. And one of those processes, number 2 on screen, is Kirtanam, which includes the powerful process of mantra meditation. Now, these 9 powerful practices of Bhakti Yoga help us to realize ourself and our relationship to our Supreme Source, to Krishna, to God. And the practice of chanting the Maha Mantra is key for our being able to practice the other 8 processes successfully. Srila Prabhupada, the Acharya who brought Bhakti Yoga to the West, would say that all the other processes of Bhakti Yoga must be accompanied by the chanting of the Maha Mantra, which is the mantra that we chant in Bhakti Yoga. And therefore, mantra meditation is critical. It's super potent. It's our main everyday practice, and if we don't chant it, our progress along the path of bhakti will be slower. Now, this next slide compiles a few reasons for why we should consider chanting the Maha Mantra to boost our spiritual lives. And these will sound familiar to most of you. For starters, though, chanting the names of the Lord is a very powerful process for connecting to Him. In fact, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that of the 9 processes of devotional service, hearing and chanting the Maha Mantra are the most important. Now, hearing and chanting were the first 2 processes listed on the previous slide, which had the 9 processes of bhakti on it. Hearing refers to hearing topics about Krishna, about God, very purifying. And chanting refers to chanting God's glories, which includes chanting the names of God. And Srila Prabhupada also noted that aside from being the most important processes, hearing and chanting are also the 2 processes or practices that we should implement first in our spiritual lives. Now, number 2 on our list on screen. Another reason we should consider adding mantra meditation to our daily lives is that chanting the Maha Mantra, or Great Mantra, is actually mentioned in the Shastras, or scriptures, the Vedic wisdom texts, to be the most effective method of purifying our consciousness in the modern age. And number 3 on screen mentions that, as number 2 points out, chanting the Maha Mantra purifies our consciousness. How so? Let's remember what a mantra is in order to find out. The word mantra derives from the Sanskrit words mana, which means mind, and tra, which means to free. A mantra is a spiritual sound that frees the mind. When repeated, mantras deliver our minds from anxieties stemming from attachment to matter, to that which is temporary. In other words, spiritual sound has a liberating quality. It purifies our consciousness and frees it from the material sounds that we're accustomed to hearing. Here on screen, we have the Maha Mantra, which is the mantra that we chant in Bhakti Yoga. And this mantra, this transcendental sound vibration, resonates with the actual us, the spirit soul within these material bodies that we currently inhabit. When we hear material sound vibration like car horns or bird song, those sounds resonate with our physical and mental bodies. Material sounds keep our consciousness attuned to material things. Again, matter refers to that which is temporary, as opposed to spirit, which is eternal. So material sounds belong to the world of the temporary, the material world, and thus they can't deliver us from the material world. However, when we repeat the Maha Mantra in mantra meditation, that spiritual sound vibration resonates with the eternal spirit soul, which is actually us. It resonates with the actual us, and it purifies our consciousness, elevating our consciousness to the transcendental level of awareness in which we're aware of ourselves and our relationship to our source, to the Supreme or Krishna. This takes time, of course. It takes regulated practice. But there's a trickle-down effect of mantra meditation. Since we're purifying our consciousness, everything below, including our intelligence, mind, body, and senses, what we talked about in previous sessions, those are all positively affected and purified over time. Now, much of the Maha Mantra's potency comes from mantra meditation's practicality for this day and age. All the Shastras, all the Vedic wisdom texts, the scriptures, agree that in this particular age that the world is in, it's known as the age of Kali, the age of quarrel or hypocrisy, of fighting. The best way to become fully spiritually realized in this age is through mantra meditation. In chanting this mantra, we follow in the footsteps of so many bhakti yogis, so many great souls who achieved the advanced stages of bhakti yoga, of love of God, pure love of God, by chanting this mantra. And they also recommend this process for us. To not follow their recommendation would be to miss out. To use an analogy, what if we refused to follow our doctor's orders for getting better when our bodies are sick? If our doctor prescribed us medicine and told us to take 2 pills a day for 5 days to get better, but we instead decided that we'll take 1/4 of a pill every other day, then we would get better very slowly, or we wouldn't get much better at all. In a similar way, material consciousness is akin to a diseased condition of life. Material consciousness refers to our state of being covered over by our false ego, our false sense of self that leads us to believe that we are our material bodies or material minds. And that state of material consciousness is like a disease that we have to recover from. We have to revive our original spiritual consciousness, our awareness of us as the eternal spirit soul who has an eternal relationship with the Supreme. Srila Prabhupada often referred to Bhakti Yoga or devotional service as a remedial measure, the remedy for material consciousness. And adding spiritual sound vibration, chanting the Maha Mantra, the names of the Supreme, is the foremost remedy or prescription that will remove our material consciousness and replace it with spiritual consciousness. Since we are all actually individual souls, not our material bodies or minds, chanting the Maha Mantra places us back in our natural position, in which we're connected to Krishna, to God, via devotional service. And this is why in spiritual life, the The prescription for chanting the Maha Mantra is to chant it every day to some degree. Of course, we can start small, with a small amount every day, but daily practice is important. Why? Well, logically speaking, if we clean our house a little bit every day, it stays in a clean state. But if we only clean it once a month, it gets pretty dusty between cleanings, right? And it's more difficult to clean when we do get around to cleaning. Similarly, if we chant the Maha Mantra every day, our consciousness keeps getting cleaner, and it remains cleaner due to our regularity of chanting. And because our minds become used to the discipline of chanting, it actually becomes easier to chant the more often we train our minds to focus and chant. And the more we chant, the more we will develop the desire to chant, the taste or attraction for chanting. Often when we're sick, medicine doesn't taste good, and yet it's healing our bodies each time we take it. So in the beginning, chanting may seem more like something we have to do, but eventually, as our consciousness is purified, we develop attraction, taste for chanting, and then it feels like the key ingredient that we were missing all along in our lives. Now, we've been referring to this mantra as the Maha Mantra. Maha is a word meaning great. It's considered great because of its effectiveness in elevating our consciousness from material to spiritual. It is the great mantra for deliverance. And the three words comprising the mantra are Hare, Krishna, and Rama, which are all non-sectarian names of the Supreme, of God. This means that you can affiliate yourself with any religion and still chant these names to connect with God. It's not unlike how when a child calls out to his mother by any name, she knows that he's calling to her. These names, Hare, Krishna, and Rama, attract the Supreme's attention, and he becomes present when we chant them. He's actually present in the names themselves. The name Krishna means all attractive, referring to the fact that the Supreme Lord attracts everyone ultimately. The word Hare refers to the transcendental energy of the Supreme. And the word Rama refers to the bliss that is associated with the Supreme, and the bliss we feel when chanting the Supreme's names. Now, what does the Maha Mantra mean? The meaning is really so beautiful. Since these are all names of the Supreme, that is why they're purifying, because the Supreme is pure. And altogether, in this particular combination, the Maha Mantra is a petition to have the shelter of the Supreme spiritual energy. We find ourselves presently in an unreliable and always changing material world, but the Maha Mantra gives us the shelter of the spiritual energy of the Supreme, which is stable and transcendental to this material world. Thus, it provides us with spiritual strength for navigating the extreme ups and downs of this material world. So this is why, even if you cannot implement the other practices of Bhakti Yoga at present, chant the Maha Mantra a set amount each day. In Bhakti Yoga, there are two ways to chant. One of them is in Kirtan, which is group mantra meditation set to music. It's really lively and energizing and fun. And the second way is in Japa. Japa is the personal form of mantra meditation, in which you repeat the mantra to yourself and use beads to keep track. There are 108 beads on the japa malas or japa strings that we chant on. And when we chant the mantra on beads, our tongue is engaged in speaking the mantra. Our sense of touch is engaged in feeling the actual beads. And our sense of hearing is engaged in hearing what we're speaking, the Maha Mantra. With three senses directly engaged like this, it's much easier for us to keep our mind focused on the task of chanting. So the process of chanting orients our intelligence in the spiritual direction, and by engaging the senses of our body, helps us to keep our mind controlled and focused on the Supreme as well. Now, while you can chant the Maha Mantra without beads, Srila Prabhupada would say that there are no hard and fast rules for chanting the Maha Mantra. Still, there are great benefits to be reaped from a disciplined chanting practice on beads. And on that note, contact us if you don't have mantra meditation beads and would like some. But if you do already have beads, then just determine how many rounds of japa you would like to chant each day, and try not to go below the amount that you decide upon. A round of japa means chanting the full mantra on each wooden bead, so chanting the full mantra on all 108 beads. There is a head bead at the top of the japa malas that we use, but we don't chant on that bead. Instead, we chant on the other, smaller 108 beads comprising the mala. Again, the full mantra is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And to start practicing mantra meditation, simply pick a number of rounds that you think you can maintain every day and stick to that for a while. And then just gradually increase the number of rounds that you are chanting. Starting with 1 round a day is a good start. Maybe stick to 1 round a day for 2 weeks and then increase to 2 rounds a day. What you'll find if you do this is that discipline in chanting really gets you far in spiritual life, just as it does in other things we practice, like in sports. And if we keep our predetermined number of rounds every day, it holds that devotional or spiritual space for us in our day. It's a set time that we dedicate to spiritual life. Otherwise, other things that we have to do will rush in and hijack all of our precious time. It's sort of like when you're not careful about what you let into your house. Eventually, the house just fills up with all these things, furniture and papers and other items. So, in a similar way, be careful to guard your time with the Supreme every day. Set aside at least 10 to 20 minutes a day for chanting the names of the Supreme and connecting to Him. Before long, you'll realize how small amount of time that is to dedicate to the Supreme. For those of us practicing Bhakti Yoga, chanting is the mainstay for holding ourselves steady in this age of distraction from spiritual life. There are so many things in this world to distract us from spiritual life, but if we just keep chanting daily, we will at least have that dedicated time to remember Krishna, to remember God. So no matter what religion you align with, or what country you live in, or what gender or race your body is, add this spiritual practice of mantra meditation to your life and experience the benefits of it. Remember that the Supreme, or Krishna, resides in each of our hearts as Paramatma, or Supersoul. And so He knows if we're trying to connect with Him by chanting His names in the form of this mantra, and He will reciprocate with us. Srila Prabhupada often noted that if we take 1 step toward Krishna, He will take 10 steps toward us. And on that nice note, we'll close today's session. Please let us know if you have any follow-up questions regarding this really powerful spiritual practice of chanting. Don't forget to contact us if you would like beads to chant on, and let us know how chanting goes for you. In the meantime, thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.